Morning team, it's me, your favourite, Jordan at the screen, and today I wish to talk to you about a response video that I'm going to be doing now to Laci Green's video, How Many Freakin' Genders? I always have to look, I've tried this recording so many fucking times, I always have to look at the name of the fucking video. Anyway, this entire debate and question issue is predicated upon our definition and treatment of and perception of gender. What is gender? So let's start there. So I know a definition was given in the video from the American Psychological Association, which stated, gender refers to the attitudes, feelings, and behaviors that a given culture associates with a person's biological sex. Behavior that is compatible with cultural expectations is referred to as gender normative. Behaviors that are viewed as incompatible with these expectations constitute gender nonconformity. Now, this does not treat gender as a singular, isolated entity. It is not a thing in itself. It is not an identity or a label or thing. Instead, gender is a collection of ideas and views, guidelines, as it were, regarding what the two sexes do and how we view them. According to this definition, gender is derived from sex, and that would therefore imply two genders, but a bit more on that later. As it also says, a person can gender conform or a person can gender non-conform. Again, does not mean any extra genders. But that, however, is the 2012 practice guidelines. This definition I'm about to give is from the 2015 APA Dictionary of Psychology, which also features in the original source. So gender, noun. The condition of being male, female, or neuter. In a human context, the distinction between gender and sex reflects the usage of these terms. Sex usually refers to the biological aspects of maleness or femaleness, whereas gender implies the psychological, behavioural, social and cultural aspects of being male or female. In effect, masculinity or femininity. Same again, but this time they've included neuter, I'm assuming to refer to psychological, behavioural, social and cultural aspects of male or female that aren't masculine or feminine, they're just normal things. But these definitions treat gender as an adjective rather than as a noun. Something is masculine or feminine or neuter instead of being male, female or nothing. Therefore, to state my gender is A, B or C is actually technically inaccurate if we're to follow these definitions. Gender is perceived as masculinity or femininity, and how much so of an object rather than a thing in itself. So this now leads us to the question of nature versus nurture, sex and gender essentialism versus social constructivism, or gender performativity. This, in my opinion, is where the issue lies. What is the source of gender? Because we've got people like Judith Butler, who argues that gender is performative. To some extent, I kind of agree. And Catherine McKinnon would argue that gender is more than anatomy, it's a power dynamic. Well, she is a Marxist, so we do kind of have to expect her to always bang on about power and class and struggle and all that kind of garbage. But if we can ascertain the source of gender and where it comes from and how it forms, then all discussions about how it is expressed, interpreted, etc. become non-arguments, in my opinion. They'll get solved by figuring out the origins of it. I mean, how can we understand the output of a system if we're not going to assess the input? And so, just with all other behaviours where we discuss whether it's nature versus nurture, we will find that the answer is both. But I'll entertain the discussion for a moment. So, nature and nurture, I'm going to bullet point the two segments. So, nature. 6,500 different genes that are expressed differently in men and women, which can reduce selection efficiency and accumulation of deleterious mutations. So even on a genetic level, we are both men and women. Men and women have two different stress responses. When faced with a stressor, men undergo fight or flight, whereas women undergo tend and befriend. Women exhibit greater risk aversion than men, and women with higher levels of testosterone exhibit lower levels of risk aversion. Women seek males who can provide resources and protection, and males seek females who can provide healthy offspring. Human behavioural sex differences are influenced by sex hormones present during prenatal development, also noted in other mammalian species. Administration of sex hormones in trans people affected sex-based abilities and behaviours. Issue of that study, though, it was small sample sizes, so just a little heads up. Different hormones released during the menstrual cycle had different effects on mental rotation ability. Again, small sample sizes, so just a little pinch of salt. male upper body strength is greater than female upper body strength. This affects our perceptions of strength and hardiness and toughness. Females naturally lactate from their mammary glands, and males do not. Well, they have been known to do so in exceptional circumstances, but this affects how we perceive women as mothers, all that sort of thing. Men are generally better at visual spatial reasoning, which is useful for hunting, and women are generally better at colour recognition than men, which is useful for foraging. See all the sexual division of labour stuff. And the now somewhat infamous male contraceptive shot study noted that the introduction of sex hormones into the participants affected their behaviours. And I mentioned a lot of the dimorphism stuff, because a lot of people like to argue that gender and biology are wholly unrelated, which is a cop-out so they can push their ideology, but I'm going to lightly touch on that later. Also, a lot of our perceptions of gender come from how we physically perceive men and women. We perceive men as being stronger because they physically are. Nurture. Fathers sing more to daughters and engage in rough and tumble play with sons. Mothers talk more and are more restrictive of physical risk-taking with daughters than with sons. Western fathers and mothers are more elaborative in autobiographical storytelling with girls than boys. Parents often encourage gender-stereotyped play behaviour and household chores and discourage gender-atypical behaviour, and both mothers and fathers are more likely to engage in rough and tumble play with boys than with girls. Fathers of young children attend more to daughters' submissive emotional facial expressions, convey gender stereotypes while discussing emotions with their children, and are more likely to express affection and respond to daughters' pro-social behaviour. And I include a lot of that stuff because a lot of who we are is shaped by our childhood and what we learn from a very early age, and that's where we really get our sense of identity drilled into us. I ignored a lot of the wider sort of things, like stuff to do with the media and what we see out in day-to-day life, because you already know all that sort of shit. You've covered it all before, so I don't need to discuss that. No point retreading that area. And so what we can see is that gender is influenced by both biology and the environment. Imagine my shock. I had to insert that. But this leads us to another question. Are we to follow the route that gender is based in objective reality, aka biology, especially in terms of how we currently treat it, which is as an identity? And I know this is quite controversial to follow, especially in this current political climate. But hey, fuck it, let's go for it. So the definition given by the APA seems to us suggesting the affirmative. So if the answer is yes, then there are two genders, plus those who fall into a fringe area where it has gone wrong. Maybe they suffer a mental health condition or some form of physical deformity or some sort of genetic or chromosomal condition. And I know those are harsh words, and they're a bit curt, but I mean, this is a tough issue, so I just want to get straight on it. And these people who do suffer from these sort of conditions, they should be receiving treatment and help, or should do, rather than being made into some kind of goddamn fad. People like to try it out just to stand out. I want to be transgender, it's the new black. And yeah, people actually fucking say that, and it really pisses me the fuck off. And I'm pretty sure people of my audience will have come across these sort of scumbags on the internet. But anyway, that's outside the remit of this video. Back to the script. If, however, the answer to the question is no, then what is the alternative? Well, then gender is completely detached from biology, which is a cop-out argument, so that it can defend all these extra made-up genders. And so, if it is completely detached from biology, it is a sociolinguistic construct. And if it is a sociolinguistic construct, then there's absolutely nothing to stop anyone from creating a wide plethora of new genders. Facebook. Nothing, because you do not need backing from objective reality. You have transcended, and you are now operating in the realm of the subjective. So essentially, if it is this sociolinguistic construct, it's just fucking wordplay. That's it. It is just wordplay. And words can take any form that a language permisses. And if it's not objective, but is subjective, then gender is not what is real, but what is felt. I feel there is an extra gender, therefore there is. And so gender, free from reality, free from the shackles, the burdens of having to bow to truth and science, it can just run amok. Be gone free, young child, in the subjective. It is nothing more than a figment of the imagination. And the imagination is limitless. Which seems to be like these fucking lists of all these new genders. Goddamn fucking limitless. But then that brings me to the classic argument used in this circumstance, which is where they go, well, if you're saying that it is a social construct and thus has no basis in reality, well, what about money? Isn't that a social construct as well? But hey, you seem to burden yourself with that one. It's very real to you, huh? Ha, got ya. Great got ya moment. Well, yeah, but no. Because money is also a social construct. Yes, you're right. But that means it therefore has no objective value. Currencies go up and down. Money can be dismissed. You can live without money. I mean, look at Venezuelan money. It's all but non-existent. It's valueless. It's garbage. Just like all these other gender as a social construct arguments. It's garbage. You can get rid of it. It has no more basis in truth than money. You know, the value of this will keep changing over time, depending on, especially in our current political climate with Brexit. There's nothing objective about our money whatsoever. It doesn't actually represent something solid. Just like gender, if it's a sociolinguistic construct, doesn't actually represent anything. It's just what we think, what we feel it represents. Well, it's just an emotion, something you've emotionally created. And so us, as a species requiring money or requiring gender, it's actually a very obscure and atypical behaviour. But again, this is all teetering dangerously close to the whole transgender realm, and that again, it's not part of what I want to get looking at today. I can't win to no ends about it. I can keep going all fucking day about that, but I shall not. So, gender has roots in biology and is influenced by those around us. And as I said earlier, let us not treat it as a thing in itself. My gender is male or female. Rather than things can be gendered, doing activity A, B or C is feminine, masculine or neither. Or a mix of both. Why not? And so this takes us to the stance that I agree with. And that is, gender is a spectrum. I know, shock and fucking horror. But it is not a spectrum from man to woman, but instead from masculinity to femininity. As was given by the APA definitions. But I would use the terms men and women instead to denote a status of maturity, such that males start as boys and grow into men, and females start as girls and grow into become women. They can be gender non-conforming, yes, but that does not detract from their maturity. Although, going back to the spectrum thing, I would also argue that whilst it is indeed a spectrum, there's a perpendicular axis to it. So, I would say it goes from 0 to 1. So some things can be feminine but not very much, or something can be neuter. And definitely neuter, it's just nothing. Or something can be very masculine, it can be all over the place. There are some actions that are very masculine, some actions that are a bit masculine, a bit feminine. You probably understand where I'm going with this, but it does not make it an identity. And it's actually funny, really, because going back to the whole maturation thing, it's actually because we take so long to develop as an organism into adulthood, and become men and women, why there's actually so much extra time for this socialization to take place, for this input from our cultures and from our peers to, take effect. I fleetingly do discuss this in other videos about how our young take so long to develop. If you want to check out my other videos, go ahead. I mean, that's just a shameless self-promotion, just give myself a little tick for that one. And so, let's return to your video, Laci, if you ever happen to watch this, and look at some of your points and arguments. I'm only going to be covering main sort of concepts and things that sound interesting to me, things that I like the sound of. And so there's the two premises that I want to respond to. So, for premise 1, in this first premise, I agree pretty much with all the points about sex, biology and gender, save for the last one. Sort of. I'm mixed on this one. How monkeys, tigers, etc. have males and females, but not men and women. An implication of this being that they do not have gender, or gendered behaviour. And I'd say this is wrong. Hopefully I'm not straw manning. There are sex differences in behaviours in many species. Look at the mating strategies of gorillas and elephant seals. Animals where the females seem to voluntarily live in harems. With the strongest males who have fought amongst themselves to compete and have these females. So much so that if a weaker male comes along to try and copulate with one of the females, that she will actually cry out for her man, the big strong guy, to come along and fight off this weaker male. There's other noted gendered behaviours in lots of other species, especially when it comes to mating strategies. That's where the majority of it seems to originate. I would still agree that they're not men and women. I would still refer to them as males and females, even though they do have, sex differences in their behavior, especially when it comes to mating strategies. I don't refer to them as men and women because I save that just for humans, because I see us as a cultured species. I'm one of those humans who likes to see us as different from mere beasts, but I'm a bit of a uppity human like that. Anyway, premise 2. The definitions given associate these behaviors to physical sex without really stating that biological sex as a guide, motivator, starting force for these behaviors. That's my first point for this premise. My second point for this premise pertains to your very accurate point about how the word gender is used to refer to a million things. And I know I've discussed the definition already, but here you're right to highlight this, because whenever gender is used to define anything that has its origins in biology, then the end result always seems to be two genders, or two ends of the spectrum, as I should probably really say. And so those things that you mentioned were sex and sex roles. And then when gender is used to refer to anything that has its origins in sociolinguistic constructs, not to mention them again, but whenever it is used to refer to anything with in sociolinguistic constructs, then we can find potentially infinite genders, because gender is used to refer to anything we can fucking imagine. Hence the limitlessness of gender, in regards to gender expression, gender identity, gender language. It just fucking goes on, because, hey, if you can invent it, you can fucking go nuts. And then later on, you question, how can there be two genders if? And this is quite an interesting little point, or little segment of your video. So you've got the, and I'm going to really fuck up all the pronunciations here. So you've got the Musuo, failing on the first word already, Musuo of China, where property follows a matrilineal path. I don't quite see how this affects gender, though, unless if power and wealth denotes gender, aka Catherine McKinnon. The fact that it follows patrilineal paths over here, especially with like naming family names, it's just a patriarchal thing. They just seem to follow a matriarchal sort of scheme. I don't think that affects gender. And then you got the Shambuli, who are now called the Shambri, not to call you out on that, but they are now called the Shambri Society of Papua New Guinea, where gender roles appear to be swapped. However, this did not change the relationships between men and women. And it is also worth noting that as they were exposed to Western cultures and people, that their behaviours started to change. If anything, really, this culture is simply not patriarchal, rather than, without gender or gender roles reversed. They are still men and women, just their value system is different. You can take their marriage practices for evidence. And then there's the Mahu of Hawaii. And again, Mahu is a sociolinguistic creation. Persons who become Mahu embody the spirit of both men and women. And again, it's more an emotional thing rather than a physical thing, rather than my gender is. They accept this spirit, which is really more of a religious thing, if you think about it, a cultural thing, not really based in biology. Would I consider this an extra gender? No, not really. Because if anything, actually, to be fair, if I was to go to, I might be, oversimplifying. If I was to go there, I could probably be considered Mahu. I do seem to embody spirit of both men and women, but I won't go too much into that. Anyway, back to the script. Point number 4, and the final point, are the Bugis. Fuck, I don't know if I'm pronouncing any of this correctly. They do recognise 5 genders. The Makunre, who are men, heterosexual men, or cis men, I think. The Oroane, who are like cis women. Then there's the Bisu, which is everything combined into one. Well, that's a party. Then there's the Kalabe, or as they call it, false woman. Should be a big giveaway, the fact that they call it false woman. Those who are born biologically male yet act like heterosexual women. And, we should notice again that they aren't actually women, they're false women. But anyway, I'm reiterating the point. And then the Kalale, which is the same but reversed, born female yet act like men. And so what we need to ask here is, does our perceptions of what gender is match their understanding of their so-called genders? Because not to go all SJW on you, but are you not applying a Western lens to your understanding of their culture? Because, the Kalabe are men who dress and act like women. Does that mean they are not men? Because they recognise that they are still men, they just recognise they're not acting like men. Is that a new gender? Are we falsely assuming it's a new gender? To put it into Western terms, whenever Stephen Crowder puts on a dress in one of his videos and acts like a woman, is he therefore a woman? Which seems to happen a lot. Whenever he seems to want to talk about a woman, boom, he puts on a dress. I'm not complaining, but is that what it means to be a woman? That when does Stephen Crowder become a woman? When he puts makeup on and puts his voice up a bit higher and puts a dress on? Is that not a reductionist view of gender in women? I don't know. perhaps. But no, ultimately, just to wrap up this ridiculously long video, fucking hell, 20 minutes, Christ. Anyway, to wrap up this video, gender is a set of behaviours, expectations and social cultural aspects of being male and female. It's masculinity and femininity, or not. The perceptions of gender do change across time and cultures, but that does not remove the concepts of masculinity and femininity. It is based in nature, but is modulated by nurture in their cultures and what is required by their societies, and should be treated as guidelines, not a thing in itself. It operates on an axis of masculinity, femininity, and 0 to 1. I hope that cleared up. I hope that helps. I hope this video has helped. I hope you have loved and absolutely got off to this video. Well, I'm in it, so you should do. But no, that's me done. I'm finished. Hopefully you did like this video. Hopefully all my audience will like this video. Be sure to comment, give me a like, subscribe, all that sort of end of video shit. And I'll catch you in the next video. Toodle pip. I wonder, if I put Laci Green's name in the video title, will I get more hits?